Welcome everyone to the last session of the day on transforming your new or existing conference room into a Microsoft Teams room. I know this is the last session between here and the bar, but I promise, I hope we got some new good information to share with you, and then we'll enjoy one after this. Again, my name is Sean Flahie. I'm the CTO and Principal Consultant at Apex Digital Solutions, and we'll get into a little bit more of that in a second. Before I really get into it, I want to again thank our sponsors here, our platinum sponsors listed there on the sheet, as well as the other gold, silver, and digital sponsors for your support to make this such a great event, and the reason why we're all here, right? So, a little bit of an agenda of what we're going to cover today. We're going to talk about your existing conference rooms, what's in them, and what is needed to transform them, obviously, into the room that we all would love, a great Teams meeting experience. We're going to talk about the basic Teams rooms components that are required. I'm big on basics. Let's start with the basics. Let's get the basics right. Everything else falls in line after that. We'll talk about some design decisions related to those basics. We'll talk about some tools. Hopefully you'll walk away with this session with some tools that you can take back and leverage and learn about the solutions that are provided by many of the Teams rooms vendors that are out on the show floor today. And then also, we'll talk about some new rooms, right? New conference rooms or new room spaces, it's kind of like the dream. We get a green field, blank slate. We can really do what we want with it, and there's many factors that go into that. And hopefully we'll have time for some questions at the end. A little bit about me. My name is Sean Flahie. I'm from Toledo, Ohio. I am the, again, CTO and Principal Consultant at Apex Digital Solutions. We are a small Microsoft partner based out of Detroit, Michigan. We mainly focus on the Microsoft Modern Work Stack, or as we all know it, Microsoft 365. So we do anything that relates to any of those licenses in the Microsoft 365 world. A little bit about me. I've been focused on Office 365 consulting since it was founded in 2012, and even a little bit before that was the BPOS days, and before that I was an Exchange engineer. So I've kind of run the gamut on the Microsoft 365 technologies, from Exchange to Exchange migrations, SharePoint, a little bit of the Power Platform, Azure AD, security, you name it. We pretty much deal with it all. But really, over the last 3 to 4 years, have had an advanced focus on the Teams platform. So whether that be Teams collaboration, Teams voice, and also Teams rooms. And specifically, I grew up in the Microsoft 365 world. I didn't really grow up in the AV world. I wasn't formally trained in AV. But in order to have a successful Teams rooms, there are some components that we need to talk about, we need to learn about. So that's really been my focus over the past couple of years. When I'm not making Teams rooms, you can find me on the golf course. This is not a golf course from Toledo, Ohio. It's a little bit gloomy right there today. This was from a recent trip that I took in Las Vegas. So afterwards, if you want to chat about Teams rooms, happy to do that. If you want to chat about my horrible golf swing and give me some tips, I'll accept those as well. When I was thinking about, I knew I wanted to speak at this conference. I knew I had some great topics to talk about, but what was the one thing that just kept coming back to me? And it's a statement that I hear from a lot of small business owners, business leaders, C-level executives. They simply say one thing: I want to have a great Teams meeting in this room, in this specific room. Whether that be their office, the conference room that they use as executives, whether it be the lunch room, a training room, a town hall, they just want to have a great Teams meeting experience. That's it, right? And so how do we get there, right? There's a lot of decisions that go into what we're going to select and what decisions we need to be made. So what I want to talk about a little bit and how we get there is when we're talking about, there's a lot of content out there on, there's guidance provided by Microsoft on how to create Teams meetings rooms, right? Microsoft provides guidance. All of the vendors that you see out there provide guidance, and that guidance really says, okay, if you've got a medium room, go here. If you've got a large room, go here. And that's really how they market their solutions. It's how it's sold. It's how those solutions scale to millions of customers across the world. And I'm not saying that guidance is bad, because it's not. I use it in my daily world. I recommend, and I have a lot of resources on that guidance to follow. But what I'm saying is, if we just follow these recommendations to a T from these vendors, we may be missing out on other experiences. There may be special things in the room that can really enhance the meeting experience, and we need to be aware of what those decisions could be. And when I ask that small business owner or that business leader or that C-level executive what they really want out of a Teams room, again, they say, I want a reliable solution. I want something that's easy to use. I want something that I can be confident that when people walk into this room, they can start their meeting and it works every time. And they also want a solution that they can be confident that the people working remotely and people in the office can meet in a collaborative manner in the best way that the technology will allow, right? That's ultimately what that business owner wants. And the business owner doesn't care about your small business bundle or your medium room solution. They care about, did I have a great meeting experience once this is all said and done? So how do we get to that point? We're going to talk about a list of factors and decisions that we need to talk through, and hopefully we'll come through working through those and how we get to that point. So let's start with our existing conference rooms. How do we get from our existing conference rooms to a Microsoft Teams room? A lot of different factors here. Number one, obviously, is room size, very important when selecting and taking an inventory of our room. Our display or projector. A lot of conference rooms already have these already in them. Take an inventory. What is it? Can we reuse it? Furniture or table design. Is the furniture or the table that's in the conference room today conducive to what we're going to put in or what we're going to replace the room equipment with? Or is the table just a solid oak table that can have nothing on it and no holes drilled through it and no cables run? That's going to play a big factor in the Teams room solution if we're going to decide on one, right? Virtual meeting requirements. Obviously, we're designing Microsoft Teams rooms, but if the business has requirements for Zoom or WebEx or GoToMeeting, that's going to influence the decision we're going to make on what equipment to put in these rooms. What is the room purpose or collaboration requirements? Is this going to be a traditional meeting room? Or is this going to be a more collaborative meeting room where people are up and walking around and writing on whiteboards? That's going to influence our decision. What are the materials of the room? The flooring, is it conducive to sound? And everyone's favorite, glass walls. How many conference rooms do you walk into where 3 out of the 4 walls are glass? And we have, obviously we're not going to go back and reconstruct the room. We have to make do with what we deal with, and we have to deal with things like glass walls. Existing audio solutions. So many times I see people have put expensive audio solutions into conference rooms, and they say, I'm just going to reuse that. I already got speakers in the ceiling, I'm going to reuse those. We need to take inventory of that. Is it certified? Will it work with the solutions that we're going to propose? Maybe, maybe not. Cable conduit or floor cores. I see this a lot. We need to hide cables under the floor, in the ceiling, in the walls sometimes, and we need to make sure that it's possible to run cables. If it's a concrete floor, we're not going to be digging through concrete, right? If we don't own the floor below us in a high-rise building, will that person below us let us run cables through their ceilings? That's a decision point. Budget, can't forget this one, right? We have to manage expectations on what budget is going to be, and we have to rely on the business to manage our expectations as well. And lastly, everyone's favorite, tell me if you've seen this picture before, the room PC. I don't know how many conversations I've had with customers with conference rooms that have something similar to this, and they say, well, we're just going to do a Teams room, but we're going to keep this as well, right? This is what users are used to, so we're just going to keep it. We've got the handset, we've got the laptop, we've got a docking station, a couple dongles, another remote, all of it complicates the solution. If I could just take my arm and just swipe all of this equipment off the table, that's what I would do, right? We're replacing all of this. The only solution we want in the room is a Teams room certified solution. That will give us all the power that we need to have a great Teams meeting. So let's talk about the basics. The required components of a Microsoft Teams rooms, starting with the front of room display. This is the window into the Teams meeting for the in-room participants. The compute module, this is what will run the Teams Meetings Rooms application. This can either run on Windows or Android. The touchscreen console, this is how you control the start of the meeting, muting of participants, the volume of the meeting. We need that for the touch control. Audio, obviously we need speakers and microphones in the conference rooms or in the spaces that we're in. We need a camera, and we need an HDMI ingest. And when I say need an HDMI ingest, do we absolutely need it? Is it required? Not necessarily, but do I recommend it? Absolutely. And the reason for that is that setup of that room PC that we had before. If users are used to doing that, and most of them are, they walk into a conference room, they say, what do I plug into? How do I plug in? And if we can still give that to them and also still get what we want in a fully certified Teams room system, best of both worlds, right? They can still take that HDMI ingest cable, plug it into their laptop, it automatically shares their content to the display, and also if they're in a Teams meeting, it will share their content into the Teams meeting as well. First, let's talk about the display. A decision point we have to make. Are we going to keep the existing display or the projector that's inside the room? Or are we just going to say scrap it and we're replacing the display? We need to decide what the display size is going to be, where we're going to mount it on the wall, what the proper mounting height is going to be. I'm not going to go into details of this in my session today. However, Adam, who's sitting right here, he has a session tomorrow morning that's going to go a little bit deeper into proper sizing of displays and systems and talking about some of the standards that we might follow when making a decision like this. So I encourage you to check out his session tomorrow. And are we going to do a single or a dual display? I'll give you a couple examples of that here. Obviously, this is a small huddle room example that has a single display. This is an example of a larger room that has a dual display. Why would you do a dual display? Well, if you have content sharing, say on the left-hand side there, one display, and you have video feeds on the other. Now, can you do it with a single display in a large room? Absolutely. It's just your video feeds may be smaller. Your content may be smaller. So you're going to get more surface area here to talk about this. Also, when we're choosing displays, we have to determine if we're going to do a commercial or a consumer-grade TV. What are the differences? Let's start with consumer. A consumer-grade TV is something you buy at Costco or at Best Buy or at any local store. It's a consumer-based TV that is meant for your home. It's not meant for a commercial setting. The warranty that comes with these displays is meant for a consumer-based setting. The second you mount that TV in a commercial space, you may lose the warranty completely, or it may just automatically void it. So be careful of that. A lot of consumer-grade TVs are smart TVs or Roku TVs that require you navigating to an app to even get to that HDMI input. That could definitely play into what the experience looks like for end users. Yes, they may be cheaper, but these may cause severe issues for usability within the conference room. Let's go to commercial-grade displays. These are generally, yes, a little bit more expensive than consumer-grade displays, but they have better warranties, and they have warranties for commercial settings. They're generally manufactured with better components. They have increased reliability, and they're brighter and meant for commercial spaces. They're meant to run for hours and hours and hours and not burn out, as if you run consumer-grade displays weren't meant to run 24 hours a day, as an example. So, commercial-grade displays recommended if at all possible. Will consumer-grade displays work? Yes. Not going to discount that because we do run into scenarios where a business owner says, I just bought this TV at Costco, we're going to use it. Okay, we'll use that. I'm going to make a recommendation. I don't think it's going to give you the best experience, but if that's the decision that's made, we have to work with it. But if I can start fresh, it's going to be commercial all day. If we're going to go consumer grade, we have to be careful about things like active video source selection and consumer electronics control. So when the PC or the display goes to sleep and someone walks into the room system lights up. We need the TV to light up as well. We don't want people messing around with remotes. We want it all just to turn on at once. Consumer-grade displays that you may buy have inconsistent deployments of this protocol that may have an effect on your Teams Room solution. And I also have to call this one out. I was just operating a consumer-grade display the other day, and I was going through the menu, and there was about 3 or 4 different standby or sleep modes I had to turn on or off. All of these, again, they seem small, but they can have such an impact when a user walks into the room and the display's not working, and they just like, the room is a failure, right? That's what we're trying to avoid at all costs. Let's talk about the compute. We have Windows or Android options available to us. Windows compute typically comes in a small form factor PC. However, there is a new bar solution from Lenovo that does have Windows built into a bar. On the other side, Android solutions have typically started with a bar solution or an all-in-one meant for smaller rooms. However, a lot of those vendors now have, again, small form factor Android solutions. That will allow you to do an Android-based room that is more modular. You can have cameras and speakers and microphones in separate locations around the room, not just in that all-in-one bar solution. There are many different factors why you might choose one or the other. It could be security requirements you have in your organization. Maybe they want Android or don't want Android. Maybe they have specific operational processes built around Windows management. 80 joining your Windows-based MTRs or not. Installing the config manager client on your MTRs or not. Intune enrollment for your Android or Windows management for these solutions is a decision. Maybe some endpoint protection or remote management, things to consider that are all possible from these compute solutions. And then when I select one, where am I going to put it? In the room. That's an important factor. It's important because cabling is an important factor in the room. We would like to hide these compute solutions from the end users. We don't want that room PC solution. We don't want end users walking into our room, not knowing what to do and unplugging cables. That's what we're trying to avoid, so if we can hide them. Obviously, when you have all-in-one bar solutions, there's your compute right there. It's built into the bar, it's mounted to the wall, it's mounted to the TV. It's not likely it's going to be moved or messed with. But if we're talking about the small form factor compute devices, behind the display might be an option, inside a cabinet or credenza, or maybe under a table, or even on the wall. I'm sorry, the wall is the touch panel. Maybe under the table, right, mounted underneath the table. But don't forget, the compute requires network and power. So wherever you choose to locate this compute device, make sure you have network and power drops to that. The last thing I hate seeing is a compute behind a display with no network drop, and there's a network cable just dropped down the wall. So we don't want that. Next is the touchscreen controller. Again, where are we going to locate this within the room? For easy access for end users. This is important. We can, the easy answer, right, is just put it on the table, right? Everyone's going to sit at the table. I want the touchscreen right there. I'm going to put it right there. There may be other factors that say it can't go on the table. Let's talk about the cabling that's required for this touch panel. Some vendors allow you to use power over Ethernet or a single cable to power your touch console. Others require a separate power cable. So you may have 2 cables going to this. You may have a power cable, and you may have a cable that connects the device back to the compute device. Something to consider when thinking about cabling for these. And to add to that, does the touchscreen need to connect back to the compute device? Traditionally, Windows, the answer is yes. And the reason is the touchscreen is actually an individual display in your display settings of a Windows PC. So yes, that needs to connect. For Android, the answer is traditionally no. Your compute device for Android and your touchscreen for Android Each connects separately to the internet. They're separate network connections, but they get paired together inside the room and logged in both with the same room account, and they work in conjunction together, but they are not physically required to be connected to each other. If we're going to put this touch screen on the table, do we have floor core? Do we have an ability to run a cable from the table underneath the floor to the compute device if it's mounted behind the display? I also want to talk about cabling and required cable lengths. This becomes an important factor. I mentioned some touch panels require and allow for Cat5 cable. This cable is cheap. It can go long distances. It can be routed many different places. Great. Other touch screens require USB connectivity back to the compute device. A lot of these devices will come with a USB cable. It might be 5 meters, 10 meters. Is that enough distance to go from the table, underneath the floor, and back up? Not usually. So some vendors will sell extended or higher quality USB 3.0 cables of 25 meters or 40 meters, and it needs to be a decision to consider. Those cables are generally more expensive, but worth it and needed if that's what the distance requires. Don't forget, don't sleep on the cable length. That's very important. I get asked a lot about USB extenders. USB extenders, yes, they can work for USB 2.0, USB 3.0, forget it. And even the USB 2.0 extenders, I'm not really a fan of. They work sometimes they don't. It's just another thing that can fail. So if you can get away with it, go with the more expensive USB 3.0 cable for these long distance runs. I'm sorry? Yeah, generally if it's going to be USB, I'm going to say 40 meters because that's the longest cable provided by most vendors. Does the touchscreen require network connectivity? As I mentioned, the Android touchscreen generally does require its own network drop. So wherever you're going to locate that touchscreen, make sure you get a network drop there. If it's on the table, network drop under the table. If it's on a cabinet or credenza, make sure your network drop is right there. So again, you're not running cables around it. And I'll also end this with, is a dedicated touchscreen controller even needed? If you have a touch display at the front of the room, the answer is no, right? You can use the touch display. Or if you've got a Neat board or a Yealink board or a Surface Hub, that's your touch panel, right? It functions as the touch controller, and it also functions as your display as well. But for traditional conference rooms, yes, touchscreen is going to be required. Camera. What will be the best video experience for the remote attendees is really what we're going for here. So we need to determine where are we going to, where will the camera be placed? Typically, I say we want the camera to be placed where the in-room participants' gaze is directed towards. What do I mean by that? Put the camera near the display, right? All the in-room participants are looking at the display. If the camera is right below the display, it looks like they're having a more direct conversation with the remote participants. I'll also say, if you can put the camera at eye level, that is preferred as well. Nothing worse than a camera that is mounted very high in the conference room and the remote participants are looking down at the remote participants as if they're the eye of God. It's just a bad experience. It looks like the room experience is disconnected, right? So that's important. A lot of cameras are obviously included in the all-in-one bar solutions. So again, those cameras are going to be right there under the display anyway. And when we're selecting cameras, whether they're in the bar solution or not, camera field of view is important. This is especially important in smaller rooms where maybe you have a table connected to a wall with a display right there as well. You know, if you have someone that's sitting at that table connected to the wall, right next to the wall, can the camera see that person? Maybe. If they have a 180-degree field of view camera, yes, they can. If they have a 120 or 100-degree field of view camera, it may be pointing out toward the room, but you're missing the people on the left and the right of the camera. This is true for bigger rooms as well. Different cameras have different field of view, so when selecting it, just making sure you're measuring it, what the field of view is needed. Manual versus automatic zoom. There are some great certified Teams Rooms cameras that provide pan-tilt zoom capabilities, but they require this thing to control the pan-tilt zoom. And do we always want that? Maybe, maybe not. The newer cameras have a lot of AI built into them. There's a lot on the show floor. I encourage you to talk to all the vendors about their camera capabilities. But they have things like speaker tracking, intelligent framing, group framing. And so we want to make sure that if these features are going to be required, we select the right camera for the room. I mentioned glass walls again. Be careful with this. Intelligent framing is really good, but if intelligent framing is always picking up people outside of the room that are either walking by or just standing there having a conversation, to the remote people, that is very distracting. We want to make sure that the remote people are focused on the participants inside the room and not focused on the camera panning to other people that are outside the room, right? And so that almost might come down to room construction sometimes as well. Maybe you need to frost the windows. Maybe there's curtains. Maybe there's other things you can do to prevent that. Or maybe we can make adjustments to the camera so that doesn't happen either. Let's talk about audio. We have two goals for audio in Teams Rooms, right? Ensure the remote meeting attendees can hear everyone in the room equally, and ensure everyone in the room can hear the remote attendees equally as well. There are many, many options for audio when we're designing a Teams Rooms. And when we're specifically talking about speakers and mics that are built into the all-in-one bar solutions, it's done for you, right? We selected this Teams Room solution. It's in a bar. It's got the speakers, mics, and camera built in. That's what we have. Be careful with this when it comes to distance. If the manufacturer says this mic will reach 20 feet, do not, or make sure that that participant is not going over 20 feet. In fact, go a little less if you can. Make sure they're at 18 feet away. There's nothing worse than putting that room solution in to put it in, and someone says, I can't hear the person sitting that far away. It's a design failure at that point, right? So what can we do to help that? All right, obviously distance is key. Make sure you think about that. But we also have options for remote or expansion mics on the table. This gives us bigger coverage for longer tables, for bigger rooms, just more mic options in general. It can also give us mute button capabilities that we might not have otherwise. I get this question a lot. We put in a Teams room and someone asks me, well, I want to mute the room. How do I do it? The answer is, well, you have the touch panel, right? You can mute the room from the touch panel. Well, that touch panel is across the room. I want to mute it now. And so a lot of these remote mic solutions have simple touch panel or touch mute buttons right on the mic pod, the mic solution that's on the table. Cable requirements, a lot of these remote or expansion mics only have so long of a cable, and a lot of times that cable needs to either connect back to the bar or to the compute solution. So make sure you're calculating how long those distances are. Do you want these cables visible or hidden on the table? I hear a lot that, yeah, we're going to put this mic on the table, but it has a cable that goes across to the grommet hole. Is that acceptable or not? Sometimes, sometimes not. I'm going to show you a picture of a pretty clean solution that I love to see when it comes to Teams Rooms to avoid cables so they don't get pulled around and moved around by end users. Some Teams Room solutions do have wireless mic capabilities. Be careful with these. Some of them are not always certified, so be careful with wireless mic solutions when deciding on Teams Rooms microphones. And that big oak table that I talked about earlier, it says it's a 100-year-old table. You will not be drilling holes in that table to save our lives. So what do we do about expansion mics? There are options that you can run and hang them from the ceiling in a pendant format, or mounting them straight to ceiling tiles if the ceiling is low enough. Consider those options as well. This is an example of a remote mic solution. This is a Logitech solution. We have a mic pod. We have a mic pod mount. There's a grommet hole below that microphone right there, and there's a mute button right on top of it. Very clean solution, and obviously it's a little bit further away from the touch screen, but if you're sitting over here on this side of the table and you want to mute, you can mute, versus walking around to the touch panel over there. But we also have to ask ourselves, will the out-of-the-box audio solutions, the speakers and the microphones that come with these vendor solutions, will they be enough? Or do we have more advanced audio requirements for the room? If we have more advanced audio requirements for the room, the question is, do we need a DSP from a vendor like Shure or Biamp? Do we have requirements for handheld mics, lapel mics, ceiling tile mics? Do we have very large rooms like this? If the scenario is like that, then yes, the answer is that you're going to need a more advanced audio solution. But if the room fits the solution that is out of the box, I would say start there. Less complexity, less things that can break, less things to support, right? If that is a great experience for the end users, let's go with that. If we need to go above and beyond with more advanced, let's go with a certified DSP and ceiling and speakers mic solutions from like a Shure or Biamp. Special room sizes is really where we see a lot of these special audio requirements. Large rooms, odd size rooms, training rooms, definitely has a need for more advanced audio. We talked about HDMI ingest a little bit earlier. Again, we want to make this cable easily accessible to all of our end users. For Windows solutions, if the touch panel is on the table, the HDMI ingest cable can just pop off of that, and it's very accessible, like in the picture there. For Android solutions, generally the HDMI ingest cable needs to connect back to the compute. So if the compute is mounted under the TV, how do we get that HDMI ingest cable to an easily accessible position in the room? Obviously, we're not going to be stringing cables across the room from our compute device for that HDMI ingest cable, so let's keep it clean. I've seen solutions where if we're going to mount a touch screen on a wall, again, we're not going to hang an HDMI ingest cable off of a wall mount. So what do we do with that cable? We can run it back through the wall. We can run it to a floor plate, or a wall plate. We can run it back underneath the floor to the table. Quite a few options for that, but just something to consider. Again, we want to keep it clean. We don't want cables strung across the room. And I'll also say, is this really required, right? I recommend it. I think it's a nice transition path from an old existing conference room solution to a new Teams room. I think it is a good solution, but I have some customers that say, I don't want that. There's capabilities such as Teams casting, where you can wirelessly share from your Teams desktop client or your mobile device. You have the ability to take your laptop inside the room and join from your laptop or mobile device with your audio off. And there are also USB dongle wireless sharing solutions that are available as well from certain vendors as well. So we've got a lot of decisions to make on our basic Teams rooms components, right? We've taken inventory of our existing conference room. We've talked with the business leaders about what are the requirements for the room. Now, how do we determine what actual hardware to install in the room? And what displays are we going to use as well? I mentioned those room size standards. This is where I say, let's go back here. Let's make this our starting point again. Start with the standard room kits and the standard room sizes from Microsoft and from the different room solution vendors. These standard kits generally come in small room, a huddle room, small, medium, and large, different kits. Microsoft even has guidance here on what those room sizes, the specifications actually are. These generally translate pretty well over into the vendor specifications for their room kits as well. So that makes it easy. But you also have custom rooms and executive offices or rooms that may require some special design as well. So let's talk about some room design tools. Obviously, this has a lot of links on it. If you want to take a picture of this slide, obviously this slide will be available when this deck gets distributed later. But a lot of the Teams Rooms vendors have tools that are publicly available that will help you design rooms. I call these room configurator tools, and some are actually named room configurators, right? You give it a series of inputs, it spits out an output. Sometimes it's an entire bill of materials of the room equipment that is required. Sometimes it's a wiring diagram of how you wire up the room. Sometimes it's a coverage map of how the microphones will sit inside the room so you can ensure that what you're selecting for the room is going to cover, like the microphones or the speakers are going to cover everybody. Here's an example of the poly room configurator of an output you might get. So this is a Windows room system where the compute is mounted behind the display. We've got the touch panel on the table. You can see the different wiring configurations that come down. Obviously, the purple cable is USB, and you see the yellow cable is power. So if you're just learning Microsoft Teams room systems and how to design, I encourage you to go through each one of these vendor tools. Not only will it help you get a better idea of how these get installed, some guidance on where to mount these solutions, how to cable them up, how to measure distances of cables, all important decisions when it comes to transforming your existing rooms. This is an example of a sample bill of materials that gets spit out for a medium conference room. Here's the hardware that is recommended, some part numbers. If there's any mounting kits, this gets forgotten about a lot. How am I going to mount my solutions? Do I have the proper wall mounts? That may not be included in the box. You may have to buy it separately. And also, if there's any warranties that you need to include with these solutions, it also can tell you that as well. This is an example from the Yealink Room Configurator tool. It's kind of hard to see on the display right there, but what it is this is a coverage map. It shows you the field of view of the camera. It shows the audio coverage map of the microphones, so you can make sure that wherever you place microphones within the room, you can know that where anyone might sit, they're going to be covered and they're going to be heard on the microphone solution. There's also 3D diagrams of there. And I also want to call out, going back a couple slides, obviously room configurators. The neat one is a special example. I don't have a screenshot of that, but the neat one actually will show a kind of a view. It's called Neat Spaces, and it'll actually show a view of the person what their view would look like. So here's a view of if you install the system in the room, what are people in the room going to see, and what are the remote people going to see? And it kind of shows you a view like that. So it's an interesting take on the room configurator tool that I wanted to call out here. So let's talk about new rooms, right? Greenfield, fresh. We can do whatever we want, right? Or so we hope. New construction or room remodels, where we get in, hopefully, involved in the blueprint stages before construction happens, before demolition happens, where we can have an influence on what the equipment is going to be installed and where things are going to be mounted and what the room experience is really going to be from the ground up. I talk a lot about floor cores and conduit runs and cable runs. Hiding cables under the floors and in the ceilings and in the walls is a very important piece of a room design that we need to consider when talking about Teams rooms. You have the ability to influence electrical and network drops. So if you're going to put compute behind a display or under a display, we need enough power for that. We need network drops for that. And so we need to make sure that those decisions are made early on. Furniture selection. I'm not claiming that us as Teams Rooms experts need to be furniture experts, but I'm saying we can have some common sense when it comes to looking at what the furniture designers have selected and saying, is that really going to work for our room selection? I'll give you a quick example. I was working with a company that they are moving to a brand new building and they're completely demoing a floor. And they're starting over with fresh conference rooms. The furniture designer decided to put diamond-shaped tables in all of the conference rooms. First thing I said was, well, what about the people sitting close to the camera? Their backs are going to be to the camera. They're not going to be able to see, right? And as soon as they said that, I was like, you're right. We need to change our tables. I'll also talk about furniture selection from a table selection, right? There are tables designed for rooms that are designed for AV equipment that have network drops and power drops for these solutions. Make sure those get included in the design as well. If you're going to require any credenzas or cabinets to put room hardware in, again, this can be designed early on in this phase. And then, are we going to do one display or two? This is a good time to determine display sourcing and all of the things that come with a fresh new build. We're going to talk about what types of displays are we going to use since it's going to be a brand new room, one or two. Hopefully it's a commercial display, right, like we talked about earlier, and then where we're going to mount it. I also want to talk about a new type of room. You may have heard of this. The Microsoft Signature Room is what they're calling it. But I'm, again, seeing a lot of this type of room being talked about when we're talking about new construction and room remodel, so I thought it was appropriate to kind of add it into this section. This is a room designed for true hybrid collaboration, right? We've got less seats around the table, a bigger display, a camera and speaker solution, a camera and speaker and mic solution that is really geared toward that remote participant experience. And this is kind of an interesting scenario, right? This is a fairly large room. If this was a traditional conference room, you could get a rectangle table in that room that maybe fit 14, 15, 16 people in there. And now we're consciously making a decision to say, we're taking the real estate in this room and we're going to put 7 chairs around that table. So this is a very conscious decision that, the benefit of that hybrid collaboration experience outweighs the cost of that real estate in some of these scenarios. So it's just an interesting concept, I've been thinking about as we deploy these, because these are very popular. Executives have been asking for these, especially when they have to have important remote meetings, kind of like we saw in the keynote this morning. I'm gonna try this out. Watch out, Adam.
Are they doing that like with 2 tiers, like a training room or anything like that?
I have seen designs like that, but this is really such a new concept. I really haven't seen that be successful or not. So yes, I have seen mock-up designs like that, but whether the camera solution and the audio solution is conducive for that, I can't really say for sure.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
Really, I'll say the key to the signature room is the display, right? We saw in this picture the new display. This is a picture from Enterprise Connect a few weeks ago in the Microsoft booth. And the difference here is this is a 21:9 aspect ratio display. And the traditional displays that we've been talking about, that we've showed earlier, that you may already have in your rooms, they're likely 16:9 aspect ratio. And if we put 2 16:9 aspect ratio TVs next to each other, yes, we can get a pretty good display size, but this gets a little bit different experience when it comes to Teams rooms. You can kind of see in this scenario, we've got the 21:9 aspect ratio display, the bar solution. We have kind of a gumdrop table here where we've got 5 seats around it. It's a little bit different example, different feel. The 21:9 display can be in an LCD flat panel display format. These also will be coming out with short throw projector format, so you may not have to have a full display hanging on the wall. But the main concept behind this is it's leveraging the Microsoft front row Teams layout. And it's important to remember that's just a layout in the Teams room solution, right? You can use front row on other displays, but you may get a different experience. It's really built, front row is built for the 21:9 display. What you're going to get out of this is instead of when you have a 2 display of 2 16:9s, you may have content on the left side, video feeds on the right side. When you have a 21:9 display, you're going to have content in the direct middle. You're going to have the chat on the right side to kind of bring chat into the meeting for in-room participants if you don't have your laptop. You're going to have raised hands on your left side so you can see who's remotely raising their hands. And then you're going to have the video feeds along the bottom from all the remote participants. The one thing I'll say about this is these are just coming out to market. Yes, there are vendors that have these on the market today. I'm hearing more and more vendors are coming out with 21:9 display options. So something that I'm going to be really, really looking forward to and seeing how these are leveraged within different room designs. And I encourage you, as you think about new rooms and redesigning them, think about what a 21:9 display could do to your Teams meeting experience, because I think they're going to become more prevalent as we go forward in the future. So we've talked about existing rooms and the basic components, and also of new rooms. Well, what do we need to do if we want to elevate the room experience, right? Get the basics right first, solid foundation, elevate the experience with things such as content camera. Put a camera over the whiteboard inside the room to do virtual whiteboarding in a Teams room. Multi-camera solutions is available from various vendors as well. Obviously, we talked a little bit about intelligent cameras that do speaker framing, group framing, and intelligent framing, all of those. Intelligent speakers are available now, and speaker attribution features are on the roadmap coming out soon. I can't confirm all of those features just yet. Surface Hub, where we can have multiple Teams rooms devices inside the same room, and they're coordinated and they're working together within the same room account. And then I also can't forget Teams panels. Installing panels outside of the room, so when you're walking past a conference room, you can tell if the room is booked or not, or you can use these Teams panels to do ad hoc booking. So if you walk by a room, no one's in it, you want to walk in the room and use it, you can automatically book the room from that touch panel. So in summary, take an inventory of your existing conference room or rooms. This will play an important part of what you're going to design going forward. When you're designing Teams room solutions, make sure you're using certified solutions. We talk about Team certified solutions. They're selling them out there on the vendors are selling them out on the vendor floor. We talk about it all the time, but too often I see conference rooms with non-certified speakers, with non-certified camera solutions, and the experience is just not what it could be. So I can't stress that enough. Make sure the solution you're using is Teams certified and not just like works with Teams, right? I've seen some vendors that have hardware solutions, camera solutions that say, oh yeah, we work with Teams, but is it really certified through Microsoft? That's an important feature. Choose the appropriate display sizes for the room, and also mount these displays in the appropriate heights using some standards. Complete the installation, keep it clean, hide the wires wherever you can from end users so things don't get pulled around and unplugged. Stress test the solution. Obviously, we can create the greatest design, but until we actually implement it, until we see it in action, we need to make sure it's going to work the way we want it to. And then going back to the original slide I said, when the executive or C-level says, I want to have a great Teams meeting inside this specific room, that's the goal, right? Now, we talked about a lot of those decision points. I would be remiss if I didn't say there's further considerations when you're thinking about Teams rooms. There's the licensing aspect. There's network connectivity aspect. Installation support. Who's going to support these after these get installed? How are you going to monitor these rooms after the fact? How are you going to train your end users to make sure they're using them properly and they're actually using the solutions? And then security is always a factor as well that's going to come into these. So with that, that's all of the content I had for today. I will take any questions that you might have. Where that block came from. I'll toss this again. Oh, they're
Or
coming.
let's say that small to medium-sized space, have you dumbed down to remove, I'm just going to use a rally terminology, a tap and the compute, and just USB direct from your laptop because everybody's carrying one and they're standard and it's the one thing that you're patching and updating all the time, and just feed directly from there.
So are you saying we're not going to use the Teams room system and you're just going to have like a rally bar with a USB just for like BYOD
Correct.
device?
Yeah, I don't need the tap. I mean, it's BYOD, it's a Windows machine, so I'm totally using everything Teams. I'm just not using the tap and the compute, which is just another Windows machine.
Yeah. Yeah, I have seen that scenario quite a bit.
Okay.
And generally, if I'm going for a full, easy-to-use conference room experience, I tend to shy away from BYOD, right? I think Michael's session earlier talked about
But you're
BYOD.
feeding an HDMI cable out on the table.
Right, you have an HDMI cable and a USB cable, right? And so yes, that will work. I generally see that used most in very, very budget-conscious customers, where they say, okay, I don't want to spend a couple extra $1,000 on a full Teams room, but I generally don't make that recommendation. The best Teams room experience is going to be with the compute, with the tap, with something like that, yeah.
It's basically your first statement. That's always the biggest hurdle. Because you're not going to train everybody, because they're just not going to do it.
Yep.
So you've got to make it dumb simple.
Right, exactly.
Oh, I noticed that you didn't mention anything about the 360 cameras.
Mm-hmm.
Is that becoming more popular, what you've seen, or?
I don't think any are actually fully released yet to the market.
Oh, okay.
But yes, great point. I know Logitech, Yealink, there may be another vendor. If I'm missing one, let me know. Somebody speak up. But yes, that's good. Yeah, neat. Thanks. Yes, they are making center of table 360 degree cameras that will do intelligent framing. So that will become part of the decision points in cameras very, very soon. I want to say I've heard in the next month or a few months, summertime, is when we'll see those released to the marketplace, and we'll see more guidance around those from actual vendors. I know a few vendors out there have some mock-ups that are not actually working yet, but you can go see what the physical hardware is going to look like.
The other aspect I noticed you didn't mention on is room schedulers. Is that something that Microsoft is thinking that's going to be part of an MTR system? Is, hey, put a room scheduler outside the room. That should be standard.
Yeah,
Like
so
a touch panel.
Yeah, Teams panels is, I guess, the official name from Microsoft, but room scheduler, same thing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, same thing. Perfect. So yeah, they're not in the room schedulers, the Teams panels are generally not included with the traditional, compute and tap. It's a separate SKU that you have to purchase. And yeah, if you can do it, I recommend it. It does add cost. You do have to run a network cable to that location to power it and to have network to it. Yeah. But yeah, it generally provides a good experience.
Do you see any MTR systems having the occupancy sensor built in? Or is that now being done with video? Or is an aux sensor on the ceiling still things that people are doing? Is that just like, that was Crestron and that's Crestron?
Yeah. I do see some solutions have occupancy in them, and I've actually gotten that question from quite a few customers that say, I have a room that is across campus, right? And I want to know if it's occupied by the occupancy sensor, because I don't want to trek my laptop and all this stuff. It's cold outside. I don't want to walk that far. And so as far as Teams room solutions goes, as far as, there's the ability to count room participants with some Teams cameras. There are some, I believe Yealink is coming out with a room occupancy sensor that can tie in with the scheduler and other things like that. But I don't know if it's fully mainstream yet from a Teams perspective, but absolutely there are solutions like that.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah.
Expanding a little on the intelligent cameras that will facial recognition and identify people in the room for the chats and who said what kind of thing. Transcriptions, is that pretty standard now, or are these based on the manufacturer?
A couple different things. Obviously, yes, the intelligent cameras are being able to tell who's speaking within a specific room, but it's obviously you'll need some sort of facial scan to determine if it's actually you in the room, right? I was in Michael's session earlier where he did a little screenshot of this. Of it shows up as like conference room 4, user 1 was speaking, and then that does the transcription for that. But until that user actually put their face into the system, into the tenant, it's not going to actually get your name from that. Yeah.
Okay, I wasn't sure how that worked.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Very good. Thanks, everybody.